Canon just released 2 new cameras in the EOS R lineup. Let's take a look at those 2 cameras, but more importantly, let's look at what these cameras tell us about the future lineup for the EOS Rs. Well, hey, what's up? If you don't know who I am, my name is Tony, and I am a filmmaker photographer in the St. Louis area. I've been using the EOS R6 and R5 since they came out, and I just love this EOS R system. I love the glass, I love the cameras, and I'm just fully embracing them. So when we get new cameras like the R10 and the R7, I'm just really excited. And although these cameras might not be for me because I've already got the R5 and the R6, I do see a lot of things that get me excited about what Canon is doing and potentially what the future is. Now, I don't have a crystal ball and I don't have any inside connections to Canon. These are just kind of things that I see are happening from Canon with the cameras that they're releasing. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk a little bit about the R7 and the R10. If you're looking for specs and samples, that's not me. I haven't had the camera in my hand yet, just my initial thoughts. And then we're gonna talk about kind of what we're seeing is happening in the future with Canon. And then I'd love to just share with you who do I think that the R10 and the R7 are for. So stick around, I've got some notes on my iPad I'm gonna be referencing every now and then, but this is gonna be a fun video and I'm really excited about the R10 and the R7, and here are some reasons why. Now, when we first start looking at these 2 cameras, we see a lot of standard similar Canon, the things that we love about them. A lot of people say that the grip feels good, the size isn't too incredibly small. One thing that we should note is that on the R10, they actually kept the viewfinder, which a lot of rumors said that they wouldn't. I'm glad that they kept that viewfinder. If you've ever shot outside without a viewfinder, it's a little bit of a pain. So that would be one way where they could have made that body smaller, but they kept the viewfinder. The other thing that we need to note is that they put the Digic X in these cameras, which is kind of a unique thing, and we'll talk about that a little bit in the future, but they have the Canon brains that the R6 has and the R5 have, even the R3. And so we're seeing that. The other thing that we're gonna see that is very standard with Canon now is the flippy screen. We're using that right now. That's just a really helpful feature, whether or not you use video for vlogging, or if you wanna get really low down shots, you can flip that screen around. That's just a really nice thing. Another thing to note is that they kept with the batteries that they've typically used. In the R7, it's the same battery that we use in the R6 and the R5. And then in the R10, it's the same battery that you would use in, say, the M50 or the T Rebel lineup, all of those E17 batteries. And so they're not introducing a whole bunch of new batteries or things to go into the system. Now, when we look at the R10 and the R7, they're very similar as far as like build and features and processing. Both of them have very high frame rates, which is really kind of surprising to me. Typically what we've seen in the past with Canons, when you get to the APS-C lineup, besides maybe the like 90D or the 7D Mark II, even then, I feel like they took their cameras and they kind of limited them a little bit. It's known as the cripple hammer, if you've ever heard of that. With these new 2 cameras, I don't see that happening. The R7 has IBIS. It actually has higher frame rates for photos than what I have. It's got 4K 60, it's got HD 120. I mean, a lot of the same features that the R6 has, which is really kind of impressive. Then we look at the R10, which I would consider the entry level for the R lineup. That's like sub $1,000. It's a crop sensor. It still has the Digic X processor, which is a little mind-blowing. I figured that they would have taken that processor and kind of stripped it down a little bit, maybe made the autofocus a little less, reliable, whatever. They didn't. They put the Digic X processor in there. So that means it has a very similar autofocus to what we're using right now on these professional cameras. Same thing with the R5, like the R6, they all have that same processor, same autofocus. They all have very similar like frame rates. So you're talking the difference between a $3,500 camera and now a sub $1,000 camera have the same pretty much guts inside of them. Then you're just talking about some other features. Now on the R10, they did strip away the IBIS and they don't have C-Log on there, which, I mean, man, the camera's only $1,000, which they have to cut down some money and some size somewhere, and so that makes sense to me that they took those things out. But I really don't feel like Canon did what they've done in the past when it comes to kind of stripping away some of these settings. Another thing that we've seen companies do, like Apple does this really well, when they release an entry-level phone or iPad, they put an older generation processor. Canon didn't do that for these two, which is really kind of surprising. And from what I see, like a lot of the features that are in the R6 and the R5 have been passed down. I'm sure that both of these cameras will have the Wi-Fi features and all of these features that make these cameras so great we're now seeing in some of these more entry-level cameras, which is really exciting. So what are some of the things that I see Canon doing that kind of get me excited about the future? The first thing is that we're seeing them expand this RF mount. I was wondering if they were just gonna leave it for full frame or how they were gonna, you know, introduce RFS lenses. Is that a thing? And now we're seeing that they're building out this line. And so now they've got all the way from an entry-level APS-C with 24 megapixels all the way up to the R5, R5C, C70. We're building out this new generation of the RF mount that is kind of just one lens mount to kind of rule them all. And so they've done a really good job with that. Just a side note, if you haven't seen the RFS lenses yet, they look a little weird because they're so small. They actually put a little ring around the outside to help them fit on that big mount, which I think works just fine, and I'm glad they did it. A couple other things is they are really getting into this hot shoe mount that's on the R10 and the R7. Those aren't on my R6 or R5. That's just kind of adding all of those new features. They're not really stripping down those things. They're kind of integrating them into the entire lineup, which I think is really exciting and gives me just a little bit of a glimpse of what's happening with Canon. And I think that they're listening to their customers and they're noting that we don't need all of those things stripped down. That's not gonna cannibalize your sales on some of the R5s and R6s. People who need these cameras, they're gonna buy them. And don't strip down all of your features and make your entry-level cameras kind of worthless. And so we're just seeing that. Another thing that we're seeing, we saw this on the R3, is that the record limit is now gone, which is great. It's really cool. I'm curious, and I was talking with somebody this morning, we were texting, and we're just wondering, are they gonna take a firmware upgrade for the R6 and the R5 and get rid of ours? Personally, I don't really care. I don't record too much longer than 30 minutes, but it's really nice to see even on an entry-level crop sensor camera, we now have that recording limit removed. So really cool things there. Another thing that I want to just mention is that we're seeing across the board this new wave of Canon. And I keep coming back to this, but what we're doing is we're seeing a company that I feel is listening to the feedback that they're getting, and they're listening to the reviews that they're seeing, and a lot of the features that we're asking for and we want to see tweaked, they're giving them to us on their cameras. And so I'm really not seeing a lot of like cripple features on the R7 and the R10. And I'm just really excited about all of that. So who really is the R7 and the R10 for? I mean, obviously, with the people that they pre-released these cameras to, wildlife photography is gonna be a huge thing for these, which with the 7D, that was always a big thing. There's an advantage of having a smaller sensor because you get that 1.6x crop, And the camera can usually run a little bit faster because that sensor is smaller. So that's why we're seeing faster frame rates for the R7 and the R10 over even the R6 and the R5, is because with that smaller sensor, you can just dedicate more of that processing power to get faster frame rates, which is cool. So if you're a wildlife photographer or somebody who's doing a lot of like wildlife, like capturing or fast action sports, things like that, that are really far away, there's nothing wrong with using an APS-C sensor. So these cameras, they're a little bit smaller, a little bit faster. They're tiny little bullets and they'd work really well. The bigger problem is somebody who vlogs. That 1.6x crop on an APS-C sensor means that your 16 millimeter is now gonna jump up closer to like a 24 millimeter. And so that's something to consider when you're looking at a smaller crop sensor camera. The other disadvantage that you're gonna have with the crop sensor is you don't have quite the depth of field that you do with the full frame. Now, you can still get plenty of depth of field on a camera that has a crop sensor. You can get plenty of blurry background, but it's just not gonna be quite the same as a full frame. So the big question is, now we have essentially two cameras around that $1,000 mark. We've got the Canon EOS RP and we've got the R10. And if you're looking at these two cameras, there's really no question for me, just from the reliability and the fact that these cameras are gonna last a lot longer, I would highly suggest getting the R10. Even though it has a full frame on the RP, the R10 is gonna be a better camera for you. Mostly just because of the autofocus. The autofocus on these cameras are just so good right now, and that processor is gonna last you forever. That's kind of my thoughts. All right, I'm excited about everything that Canon is doing with these cameras. I actually considered picking up an R10, but I just don't really want a camera without C-Log. The IBIS, I would actually enjoy having a camera without IBIS, so I may end up picking up the EOS R5C. I haven't yet, because the R5 and the R6, they're just doing everything that I need. And so if we get into higher end cinema work, then we're using the C70, C300s, blah, 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 blah. And that R5C is just kind of in between what I need and what I want, but we'll kind of see what happens. Now, if you are new to the channel, you haven't subscribed, I would love to ask you to join us. We talk a lot about Canon cameras. We talk a lot about tutorials, how to get better, photos, videos, the whole works. So subscribe if you haven't already, but otherwise, let me know what your thoughts are on the R10 and the R7. Are you excited? Are you disappointed? Are you seeing some cripples that I am not? Personally, I'm very excited about these two cameras. I'm curious if they're gonna release some sort of rebel line in between these, or maybe even like in that $600 to $700 range. Like, what can you do with a camera that's $700 in the EOS R lineup? Is that gonna be a thing, or is the R10 going to be the entry level for it? Lots of good things going on. Leave your comments in the comment section, and we'll talk to you later. See ya.